Hey, Holdus, welcome. This is Josh, integratingpresence.com, and I'm joined again with Wendy Nash of kindlycutthecrap.com. Wendy, what's going on today?
Well, I'm calling from Gubby Gubby Country in Queensland, in Caboolture. What's going on? It's hot. It's summer, so it's the end of the year. I'm just about to get the YouTube, so I just need to turn off the mute there. So, we have the mute. We have YouTube on, by the way. So if you, our listener, would like to ask us a question, you just fire away, and it comes up. We'll get it. So
Right,
you,
and,
we
and we'll
love
try
questions.
and we'll try not to mention platform names, so I won't have to do as much editing for the Insight Timer version when I do that. Because anytime I say YouTube, I have to edit it out.
Yeah,
Anytime I
yeah.
mention a title, anyway, it's all part of it. And on last plug here, Instagram.com. Why we're so get all the editing done here at the beginning for the recorded
All
version.
right. So
So
whatever
welcome everyone.
platform you're meeting us with, we just love your questions.
Yeah,
So fire away. We often get some good questions, some really
yeah,
interesting ones, and how do we do that? And leftist, like I never think of those questions, so that's great. Love
they
it.
are. All right, so this is our I'm just going to read the intro I have written here. This is the 29th installment of the ongoing live series with Wendy Nash, where we delve into meditation practice both on and off the cushion. In this one, we plan to focus on the relational aspects of partners, teams, and communities. Recently, it seems we've been somewhat overlooking the more meditative dimensions of our chosen topics. While this episode may pose unique challenges in how to directly integrate with formal meditation, since relationships influence every aspect of our life, though, we'll still aim to attempt exploring how meditation practice impacts our interactions with partners, teams, and communities, and how these, in turn, affect our practice. We'll examine how these dynamics can run in tandem, come in conflict, or complement, support, and enhance one another. So, kind of a little bit of fancy language there, but we all know that relationships are everything in our lives. I think women in general, if I can use this old outdated term, are way better at relationships than men in general and value them more. However,
I
maybe not.
I
Go ahead,
actually
jump in here.
I actually have a bit of a question about that. There's a
Sure.
lot of assumption that guys are that that women are better at relationships
Okay.
than men, and I'm not sure that's entirely true. I'm not
All right.
convinced.
Okay. Well, let's jump into that. What makes you say that?
Well, it's not really about meditation, but certainly
Sure.
during meditation,
Hmm.
a lot of the complicated relationships that I have are with women.
Yeah, I didn't say they were easy. I didn't say it was easy.
But what I'm saying is there's this idea that women are better at relationships than
Oh,
men.
I see. Yeah.
And so I'm questioning whether that's actually true
Hmm.
because I know a lot of really sensitive, thoughtful guys,
Hmm. Oh,
and
totally.
they're heaps better at relationships than a lot of the women I know, and also better than I used to be before I took up meditation and learned how to be a nice person.
Well, these are really good points, Wendy. Yeah, these are stereotypes, right? And first off, I'm trying to figure out how to go full screen with this, and I can't. That's why I'm a little bit not fully
Distracted.
present yet.
I tell you
But
what,
I'm
I'll
just,
I'll I'll keep going, and you
yes,
try and figure out the tech there in the
sure,
background.
sure,
How about
sure,
that?
sure.
All right. So I was thinking as you were reading out about this, what are we actually going to cover?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's true, we don't often talk about formal meditation practice, but instead what meditation practice does and it gives you. But as you're now in a relationship, a full-time relationship, whatever that means, particularly as you go back and forth because of your visa issues. But I'm in a full-time relationship now, and I wasn't always. We've only been together for 4.5 years or something. And when I've had really solid practice, and then I've met somebody, and actually my meditation has dwindled. But in this relationship, actually, it has lessened, but I now meditate with my partner. And that makes a huge difference because we start with the meditation, then how was your sit? And that helps us to talk about any issues that are arising between us. And it just does it when it's really small, when it's a little niggle, rather than when it's a big kabang. So the senses of resentment are less likely to arise. So it feels cleaner. So just that side of things, how that's one side of formal meditation practice that I think is something to navigate when you're in a relationship. Not quite what you've put here on the thing, but what do you think? You're now in a relationship, so how have you found it?
Yeah, this is really, there's a lot of stuff here to cover. So we've got the generality I started off with, and meditation in intimate relationships. And there's a whole distinction of partners. Usually when we think of relationships, we just think of an intimate, right, maybe potentially long term, one with our beloved. This is kind of what the word relationship has come to mean. And I want to mean it also in the broader sense, and especially with partners. It could be just, a platonic business partnership and things like this. But I'll come back to that since you ask and address. So, yeah, before I jump into the generalizations I started off with, when it comes to my meditation practice and my beloved, my partner, my fiance, um, we don't together a lot of time. Sometimes we will. And a lot of times she'll ask how my meditation went. And there's a lot of things to share sometimes, that come up, and just about in general how practice is. And then some of her work, how it relates meditationally, in general, and how meditation practice in the past has helped, I guess, open a lot of vistas and doorways to where she is now, even though she doesn't have a strict kind of formal meditation practice like I do, and using the kind of confines and parameters I do. But when we do, yeah, it is quite a lovely thing as well. I am fairly dedicated to my practice, so it's a little bit unusual that there's really no compromise. I mean, that it's helped me so much in my life it's a huge priority in my life, and she supports that. I'm very grateful for that, and in turn, it helps me be more supportive of her and us as well, just in so many ways. Okay, so back to the generalities. Yeah, actually, I want to change that and say maybe women have more challenges and at relationships, while men, they don't take it as seriously and put as much time and effort. Maybe that women, maybe because it's not that big a deal, but men tend to be more challenged, I think, on on their career, or because maybe they just put more emphasis. This now I'm talking older generations here, I guess, too. Now the younger generations, I would agree with you, Wendy, that um, tend to be kind of more sensitive and relationally attuned than older generation. I'm thinking the boomer generation here too, where the typical stereotype there is just kind of, maybe coming out of the hippie movement. And I don't know how helpful these generalizations and classifications are, but anyway, I just hear about business and things like that. So I guess it's not. And so I think, yeah, maybe these are old, outdated, and things like this. So, but what I want to emphasize here is how important relationships are too, and relationships to ourselves as well. But in this context, we're talking about partnerships here. And so I want to also talk about, I know people really love this juicy thing of intimate partnerships and relationships, and people really eat that up. And there's a lot of room for improvement. And it's hard to find role models actually in this space. So I think it is important. I also think it's important to look at partnerships other ways too, like, in the work world. How are partnerships in the work world? And, how could they benefit from kind of more meditative practices as well? What other kind of partnerships we have? We talk about partnerships between organizations too, or businesses we partner with if we're like entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, um, sole proprietorships, and we partner. Like I had someone from a university reach out to me from in Scotland, and they found my work, and they're interested in working with me. So I might be doing kind of a partnership with that. And so, yeah, how do we relate to our partners and partnerships? And how should we have a doorway in here, or like, is there like some general advice, I think, or things to look out for? I'm wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about today. I was teaching a class, and it was at University of the Third Age, and which is it's a very cheap. How do I say University of the Third
Inexpensive.
Age? Yeah, well, it's an organization where people like in when you're in your 50s and older, you volunteer your time and you teach a course. So it could be French, it could be knitting, it could be crochet, it could be woodwork, it could be bike riding, it could be anything. It depends on what the teacher is going to offer. So I offered mindfulness, but the class before me was crochet. And one of the ladies, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got to help you. You know, it's time to pack up because I'm going to be teaching mindfulness." And one of the ladies came up to me and she said, "What's mindfulness?" So I said, "Well, you know that when you're in a bit of a knot in your mind and you just need a little bit of a distance and you want to create space around that, it just helps you to kind of calm down." And she sort of was going, "Oh, no, I'm very calm." And then she said, "Oh, no, when I do karate," she's in her 70s, 60s, 70s. "When I do karate, I'm white as anything." And so I said, "Okay, so when you're like level one, level two, whatever she's doing." And I said, "Just look to the sides of the room. Doesn't matter what you're doing." Because she's going, "Is karate anything like mindfulness?" And so I said, "Well, it's kind of a little bit." So I said, when you're in the room, just look to the side of the room and that'll help you calm down. And so just talking about meditation formal practice. So that is a practice that I do in the meditation.
You've mentioned this before. It's great. Yes.
Yeah. And she just went, "Ah." And so I'm hoping she'll turn up because only one person turned up to my class. So I might get two next week. So I'm very optimistic. Oh, 100% increase. What can I say? But then I had, just to continue with that, then I had the next person who was in my class, and was getting really angry with driving and things like that. So she wanted, her husband actually had died a few years earlier, and so she was trying to figure out, well, she's decided she wants to sell her house and move into a retirement village, and she wants to be a bit calmer. She's a bit less anxious. She's having to navigate changes in her relationships with her children, and her husband, who's now died, but that doesn't mean to say he's not a part of her life. And then the community and all these different people and how it all comes together. And yeah, so there's been a lot of change. So when I was, what I did when we started the meditation, the actual meditation part, is I did that thing to kind of calm her down and to place her in the room. I do these kind of ways to introduce that space. And it was really useful because it helped her place her body mind in the room. So we were in a relationship. There's two of us in the room, the whole lot of four extra chairs, two of us in the room. And because of this sort of placement, sort of movement, it was able to, she felt really secure, and it was quite noisy outside. The people were chatting in the next room, and Dave comes along, "Hey." I mean, I'm going, "Oh no, this is terrible." But she was really able to focus, actually. So she really got a huge amount from it. So and and just calmed her down immensely. So I think that is all formal practice. I'm guiding her through the meditation throughout. But she said she was able to, what was the word she said? Bit intrusive with the sound, but then she was able to it was able to recede actually quite quickly. So in terms of relationship, looking at it from a more general perspective, she has a senior role in the U3A group. And she could have been really irritated with the people who are in the room next door or the guy outside or whatever. But instead, she was able to really harness something about the mindful, being mindful here. And she just got it, she loved it.
That's beautiful, Wendy. And it reminds me of what this does. Meditation is it changes our relationship to ourselves and our surroundings. And then that really has no other choice but to not bleed over, but then influence everyone we come around. When we start relating to ourselves and our environment differently or in improved aspects, then everyone benefits that we come in contact with. And I love this practice because we're so, I think, conditioned and habitually relate to the world through the visual senses. And usually we're either conditioned or maybe, I don't know if this is a natural aspect of consciousness, is to focus on one object, to focus on an object. And a lot of times it's in the mind, right? And so what this does is this practice, it immediately draws us out of this contracted state of visually focusing on one object. Like, I mean, just for instance, I just kind of focusing on the screen and Wendy here. And as soon as she mentioned that that's an option to widen the visual field, I got drawn out of that tight, constricted, narrowed thing that I wasn't even really aware that I was doing, right? And it's kind of like disrupts the system in a way. And it said, oh, wow, so much more is available immediately just by
Mhm.
noticing we have peripheral vision. And so the eye consciousness then it immediately becomes apparent. And oh, hey, wow, I'm relating to the world visually. That's mainly how I'm experiencing the world so much. And we don't even realize that we're actually seeing. We're just focused on what we're seeing, not that actually seeing is happening, right? And so then that goes into a greater thing of space, right? So we notice the space. Usually we're focused on objects, but we don't really pay attention to the space that they're in or surrounding, or we do just kind of momentarily so we can orient ourselves to another object. So when we do this, it's a really great practice, especially for those who don't have immediate access to deeper levels of the body too. Then we can notice, oh, hey, this is a meat suit in a space here, and yeah, I'm navigating 3D reality in this thing, and I'm not really even aware of that either most of the time. But this brings us into that notice of that, and then because we move around in this meat suit and relate with people in the real world, in the body, right? And so that poses another challenge when people are doing more interactions and spending more times in front of a screen. Then it's a virtual world, so to speak. It's in the mind, and so that is a whole nother um, ball game, I guess, of how we're relating to people online, because it is more in the mind, because usually it just takes fingers or voice or whatever we're doing online, and it's mind driven, and the space, the physical space gets neglected, and the body gets neglected, and so yeah, so all this can help us at least become more and more aware, attuned, mindful of first location of where our partnerships are happening, our teams, our communities. Are they virtual? Are they online? Are they in the real world? How much awareness do we have? How much kind of do we need? And I think the answer to that is there can never be enough mindfulness. And then how are we relating? How are we seeing this? How are we viewing? And then how are we responding to what we're doing? And of course, where's our attention, and how are we relating? Like, are we choosing to have our attention go somewhere, or someone else choosing our attention? And how helpful is this either way, whether I have the illusion of I'm choosing where the attention goes, or someone else is kind of choosing for me? And then how am I with that? So these are all kind of questions to consider from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, as you were saying that, a couple of things came to
Mhm.
mind. Do you meditate with your eyes open or closed?
A little bit of both. Traditionally more with the close, but then um, open towards the end, the last few minutes open. And yeah, I've had discussions about this too, and we have as well. And yeah, during the Zen practice, that I was doing. Traditionally that's done with eyes open. I was still doing that with eyes closed at some point, but overall more eyes open than usual. And yeah, of course, this is helpful because we relate to the world with our eyes open. However, you can go deeper with eyes closed sometimes. So there's pros and cons to each approach. And remind me of your take on this again, Wendy.
Oh, I tried the eyes open, but I've got such a crazy mind that it goes all over the place. I just have to be eye shut. But I trained my husband to for him to have his eyes open. And so I look over and I see he's got his eyes open. So I was just wondering. He's a very still, gentle character. So
Well, this is
you
this
know,
is this is interesting. Go ahead.
no, so it's easier for him to be let. He just finds he gets stimulated by the world, but he's able to regulate that more effectively than I am, where I'm always like taking it in. And it's like squawk, squawk, squawk.
I think this is a good thing to point out because if we're kind of overwhelmed by external stimuli, then closing the eyes I find is helpful. However, if I'm then overwhelmed by internal stimuli, meaning the mind is kind of restless and keep going on and bouncing from this topic to another, past to future, planning, ideas, cognition, then I find actually opening the eyes a little bit. It's like, oh, wait a second, there's a floor right there. Okay, floor. Oh, that's kind of calm. That's not too theoretical or in the past or in the future. Okay, that's all it is. That's kind of boring, but it's the mind will kind of quiet down. But other times I'm just like, oh, I just want to shut it all out for a while. My eyes are burning. I've been looking at things all day. It's just I can just release and relax into kind of a blank slate in a way, or light arising, things like this. So yeah, it kind of depends on the what's needed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wondered about. So we've talked about relating to people in our relationships.
Mhm.
So today, when I was teaching this class, and two people appeared. Well, g'day, Dave. Yeah, well, I'll be there in right a minute. It's like right outside the door. And it's like so close. And then the women in the office, la 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 la. And I was trying to talk and give the talk, and she had to really focus because it was so noisy next door. So I had to tell them to pipe down. But and change position so she could hear me. But we talk about relationship, but we're talking about formal practice and how we're relating to what's going to other people, actually, in outside the room. And she was able to really focus, and she said beforehand that she'd done quite a lot of meditation, mindfulness practices, and she was able to really get into the zone of it, which I can never do. But she was really able to do that when we were together. Whereas I was like, oh God, I want to get up and I want to tell those guys to shut up and shh, and the women to shut up. I have to say something next week. But see, yeah, it was the first day of the course. But how do we relate to other people? And I'm just kind of a bit rubbish actually at that. Because I'm going, shush, shush, I'm trying to create a thing here.
It's a common thing. So when I was doing this volunteer work, like about every week for 6 years, and I would go in like a workout room. And when it was my time, I had to go in there and start setting up. But there would still be people working out in there, and they had a radio blaring. So it became like this. I wouldn't say war, but I'll just exaggerate a little bit. To this radio war of turning it on or turning it off. And so finally, I got approval to just unplug the radio and put it in another room. What was going on. So then it just kind of gave it. I wasn't it was a regular thing though, of trying to get the space. And then you would just have people in the other room. You could still hear it with the door closed, turn the radio on, and still work out in there and still hear it. So yeah, it's a really. So on one hand we have, okay, the whole point of having kind of a formal meditation and in a group of it is to create the best possible conditions we can in order to have some kind of reference point of, okay, this is more of an ideal thing. we can really have the supportive conditions to do what we can to the best of our ability. And on the other hand, we have the real world. And I was just the other. It's funny you mentioned this too, because I have a couple friend that I'm helping doing some renovation work on a apartment they're fixing up for the guy's dad. And she said, I was meditating the other day, and their new puppy came up and started barking, and she couldn't meditate. And I'm just like, well, this is the whole point of meditation. We're in situations all the time in our lives where we can't control it. We can't control the outcome. So how are we? This is one of the more important spiritual questions. How are we when things don't go our way? You know, and the whole point of kind of creating those environments is then to build up some strength and resilience to be able to meet challenging environments and challenging situations. But it is a whole nother dynamic when that's actually involved in the meditation practice itself with these communal settings and community settings. So yeah, it's a constant thing. So yeah, patience is really helpful, and we're building the muscle. And it's just, I want to commend Wendy for having the kind of wherewithal and mindfulness and awareness of her own internal processes and her perceived shortcomings. But I would say that's actually quite normal and natural, because I went through the same thing when trying to facilitate, meditation for years in these less than perfect environments. This is not a retreat center we're going into here, where everybody's on the same page and want to are paying money to be there and all this stuff. No, this is okay. You get thrown a bone here. I mean, not, that's maybe not the right way to put it, but yeah. And then how do we work with what we have? Some people come into meditation and internally it's a huge mess, and some people have quite amazing experiences right away from doing this practice. And, things come up and we have to work with whatever we're presented with, and how are we with that? And what do we do? And how honest and straightforward do we be? I mean, do we, how much do we need to say, okay, how much do we need to say and when we're facilitating, experiences and things like this? So it's all good things. And I think, yeah, if we want to comment on that, and then I think maybe we'll move towards teams a little bit, if you'd like.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to what you've
Mhm,
just said. I think
mhm,
I'm happy to go on to Teams.
mhm.
It's there. I'm happy to do that. You go.
So this is the one I feel I have the least experience in. When I think back to teams in my life, it was when I was an adolescent and playing sports. And to me, which I don't do any sports anymore, I honestly, I'm not interested at all. Um, St. Louis Cardinals are in St. Louis, which is a pretty popular baseball team, but I know the name and the stadium, and that's about it. I don't even know if I could tell you any of the players. And so, not that I'm totally against it. The big thing is sports bring people together. And then they can all root for a common cause, and there's a kind of unification. But I always say, imagine what it would be like if you had that kind of interest in unification, and put into action something that actually made a huge difference in the world for the benefit of people. Other than just the mere fact of gathering and supporting. You know, and then this notion, I think, is taken into the business world of teams and competition. And so the teamwork, I feel, is great. It's unity, cohesion, and working towards a common purpose and cause. But it's often framed in the sense of I have to win and compete and do better than. And what that does a lot of times is give way to hostility. And I'm going to do whatever I can. It doesn't matter what's my path to achieve a goal. That's one way. And then if I lose, then I'm in pain. I lie down. I feel bad about things. So these are kind of more the negative aspects of teams, and this is not really what I want to focus on. But I don't really have any experience in the positive version, other than theoretically, a team is, I guess, a small group that works for a common purpose or goal, and that there's really not much hierarchy. Maybe there's a leader, but pretty much everyone has their own skills and abilities, and they're working together, to address kind of an issue. I guess I don't know, some kind of common goal, purpose, or cause, and and working together in their using their specialties maybe, and then also having commonalities, and there's kind of a team dynamic. But I don't know if I'm getting this right or not. Wendy, how do you feel when teams? And oh, the other thing before I forget, and when it comes to relational practice in meditation, we have talked before about meditation circling, and we've talked about insight dialogue too. So these are practices where they're an actual relational external practice where we bring our own personal formal sitting practice and meditation practice to the relational meditational practice. And what that does is then helps evolve and change and progress. And then we can take what we've learned and back to our own personal formal sitting practice. Yeah.
Yeah. So another one that I have recently learned is Vipassana out loud.
Oh,
So
wow. Tell me about that. Yeah, if you'd
so
like.
that's basically where you basically are sitting opposite somebody like you and me like this, and then I might talk about I might talk about a problem I've got, for instance. Um, so I'm just going to say, for instance, say my class only had one person. Well, now I'm worried, will they cancel the class and all this sort of stuff. So and then you just sort of track that and you go, oh, it's a bit like you're sort of noticing what's going on while you're sort of saying things, and the other person is saying, um, is it, what can you feel, and can you hold this? That's sort of what the only thing the other person says. And so what are the sensations and feelings you're having right now, and then can you hold that? And I found with very bland ones, like when it wasn't really a big thing, then it was a bit more, it sort of felt rambly and whatever. But it was very effective when I had something really big. Say I had a problem relationship in some way, like with somebody at the gym or somebody elsewhere. Then I felt, they had a lot of energy, and it worked really effectively. So my feeling with insight dialogue is it works really well in a curious way. So it helps you open up what is underneath that you don't realize that you're doing. Whereas I felt Vipassana out loud was more, I've got a problem and it's kind of buzzing around in my mind, and so I want to see if there's a way to what's going on, kind of thing. Yeah,
Okay, so let's just see I understand this right. If I'm talking about the challenge, then the other person is kind of like a support and a sounding board, just asking me back, what am I feeling, and can I hold this, right?
yeah,
Kind of as just witnessing and supporting and giving that immediate prompting of support, right? With those two questions,
yeah,
while the person is kind of talking through what they're going through and noticing as well, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
And so with regards to teams,
Hmm.
so uh, as you were speaking, I think the US is very, very competitive. It's a much more individual. It's the
Yes, good
most
point. Yeah.
individualistic country in the world. I mean, Australia's coming up there, no two ways about it. The communitarian side of Australia has sort of dropped. There's no two ways about that, and it's much, much more individualistic. So, what would I say? I mean, have you got a common goal? That's, I don't know that I would say that's the case. You know, on the externally, you might go, well, we've got this project we need to get
Yes,
done.
that's what I was talking more about. Yeah. Yeah.
But actually, there's a whole lot of different things that are going on, and a whole lot of different relationship dynamics. And you've got these strangers that you spend those sort of 8 hours a day with, who you have no other reason why you would be in the same space with them other than they happen to be sitting in a chair next to you.
Good
you
point.
know.
I guess I meant more in a relation. Ideally, it would be people that we know and that we actually choose and approve of ourselves to go into a team with, not just someone we're thrown into at a workplace with. Yeah, yeah,
But how often is
sure.
that the case? I mean,
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I say I
even
don't have any experience with it. It's not.
yeah.
I've really never experienced it. Yeah.
I mean, even in, you might say, a family, you have a family and you've got, what what have you got? You know, you're strangers to those people. Yes, at some level you aren't strangers, but actually you are strangers. You aren't in that space with other people. You didn't choose those people. You just happen to be, they're a bunch of strangers that you happen to have around you, you grew up with. And I think also, if you were in a religious community, now you've spent a bit of time in different religious communities of late, there's always lots of he said, she said, he said, even in monasteries. So I think that, I don't even get on with myself half the time. Why would I expect anybody else to get on with me all the time? Like, that's just ludicrous.
Oh, Wendy. Well, not all the time. Yeah, that's kind of extreme, but yeah. But yeah, I think people would get. I get on with you fairly well. I feel so. I wouldn't be so quick to write yourself off, is what I'm saying. But
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Go
like
ahead.
we're so, but I mean, I've had my plenty of workplace challenges, and and also intimate partner relationships and family and friends, and even so friendships, they come together. What is it? A season, a reason, or a lifetime? People come to you, and it's interesting moving into a new community. And today, for instance, this lady who was in my meditation class, she might become somebody who becomes uh, a friend. She might not. We might just know each other in the context of this environment. And I was actually in an insight dialogue class. I do it on Friday mornings, my time. And I had somebody we break out into breakout rooms into dyads. And so we're sort of working through so we sort of get 5 minutes each to talk about a particular thing. And not to go into the story of it so much, like he said, she said, she said, he said, but so much more, well, this is my question, or I'm feeling like this. And the question about how do you deal with colleagues and how do you speak to colleagues, and actually, I don't know, I'm sure I've said this, but the first word in a question is kind of key to what the rest of the conversation comes to. So I could say, and so this is
Why? I
relationship.
remember your thing is why. That's not really usually a helpful question, especially in relate. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Or do you think, or would you say, or is it true, or all that. That's not really a helpful question because it's not open enough. It's not curious enough. So we actually talked about, what do you listen to when you are having a conversation with somebody. She wanted to talk about her son, but also with colleagues, so she has a team. And she was saying, well, actually, so I was going, what I hear you care about is, and listening to what the person cares about is sort of where the gold is. That's what you really want to notice. And using, I guess, mindfulness and meditation practice in a conversation like this, to me, I can't really differentiate between a formal meditation practice and off the cushion, because when you're coming together and you're having that conversation, so I might say for you, what I hear you care about is how to have a show which is sticks to the topic, which is meditation Q&A, and talks about these challenges, and keeping the conversation open and curious. So that's what I hear you care about. Does that sound on track?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So this is. I love all the levels Wendy uses here. It's great. It's really good, and just your pacing and the voice too. Yes, of course, that's spot on. And um, yeah, it's attention, right? In formal meditation practice, our attention is always somewhere, whether we choose it or not. So the attention in this is what are we paying attention to when someone talks, And I like this kind of navigational kind of our compass of, okay, well, we're going to try to find out what's important here, what's of value to the other, and which I find very helpful because living from our core values, identifying our core values, and using that as an orientation and a means of direction and um, satisfaction in our lives and purpose and yeah, driving force. So then when I recognize my own values and what's important for me, well, then I just kind of will be conditioned to have a natural tendency and interest to what the other that I'm in relation or talking to, interacting with, what's important for them. And I think this is a great orientation and thing to pay attention to. Now, I want to ask you though. I already did this once during this show, if I remember. Like, Wendy, what do you think of that? And so, to me, that seems fairly open because I'm asking you that there's really no limit here other than one's own mind, which can be limiting, right? But then when we're talking, language is at the forefront, and language is uses cognition in the mind, and it can be very beautiful and helpful. And but it is also limiting. It can point to things greater beyond itself as well. But so when I say, I guess maybe how do you feel about that would be better, or but think about that. So I'm just curious, why is that limiting? Or so then I said a why thing, or like how is that limiting? Or tell me more about this, please.
So
Hmm.
so from a, like, just I can just feel my own. So we're talking about meditation in meditation practice, and I think meditation is about becoming aware of. I'm getting really hot, so I'm
Oh,
sorry about,
sorry, sorry.
like, woo, it's really. I've got the fan on full board, but
Oh,
it's
it's it's
really
it's
humid.
it's summer in Australia, huh?
It's Queensland,
Oh
and
my
it's like
goodness, so it's freezing cold
80%
here. So
it's 80%
not totally
humidity
freezing,
and
but
30
oh
degrees.
no,
So
wow,
it's like,
completely different here. Yeah.
and my door is shut. So that's
Oh
why
no.
I'm really.
God.
But as you said, what do you think about that? And you said it very
Hmm.
quickly. I
Hmm.
could feel myself kind of feel a bit cornered. What do you think about
Oh
that?
yeah, it's kind of putting
Yeah,
you on the spot, kind of
exactly.
forcing you to give something, whether you
Exactly.
want to or not. Of course, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and it has an intellectual response.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The other one is, how do you feel about that?
Mhm.
So, what I tend to do in my conversations with people when they're a bit, well, I at the end of the meditation, uh, through the in the guided one, I will ask, as sort of as the wrap up. I go, um, what was your experience with this? I think it's what I think that's what I ask.
That's
Yeah.
great.
What was this experience like for you? That's what
Hmm.
I ask. What was this experience like for you? And then I do the kind of wrap up. Okay, move your fingers and toes. But it just gives that person to go, oh, actually, I really liked it.
Hmm.
It's a nice closing on that.
Hmm.
So to answer your, and then at the end of the class that I held today, I mean, obviously it was just the two of us, so it was more of a conversation. I said, and how do you feel about today's class? And she said, oh, it was really good. And I mean, and she said, I found it very peaceful and I found it really. So tell me, how do you feel? It just allows people to come forward with something that is sitting here. And, when you've had a conversation, it can be a bit tense, and you might, maybe with your partner, and it's like you think you've finished the conversation, you've finished, and then you go, and so how do you feel about the conversation? How do you feel about our chat? And then they go, look, it was good, but I just don't feel that you were really listening to me, Josh. You know, it just gives that opportunity. Like, I think it was good, but I think I still have this. I'm not really finished with this thing, but I need to think about it a bit more. So that's quite a nice way to end a conversation, which is a bit sticky. Or every day I catch up with my friend and I'm teaching her to meditate, and I do a 5 minute guided meditation. She goes wild, wild mind. That's all she can tolerate. And and I always ask, as the wrap up to our conversation, how do you feel about today's conversation? And it just gives her an opportunity to say, that was good, or I didn't really like what you did today, or whatever it is. Helps me get some feedback on that. Um, the thing about how do you feel, you have to be careful with feelings,
Yeah,
because in a workplace, it's not appropriate.
exactly.
That's why I like how uh, what I hear you care about is, which sounds like a statement, but it's actually a question, because
Hmm.
it's asking for feedback. What I hear you care about
Sure.
is knowing what to say in a conversation, or how to bring conversation or understanding or question framing into a conversation, which is what I mean. That.
This is all great. So yeah, what I'm, I guess, asking for is what's the best way to get feedback. And I also like this other step of making it optional, because if I ask someone, what do you think, how do you feel about how we talk, well, then it kind of also forces them, not forces them, but it's like, so sometimes I'd like the extra step of, oh, if you're open to giving feedback, I would love to hear that, something like that. But you're right, it has to be the appropriate and at the right situation. Not everybody wants to give feedback too, um, but some people want that, and they're not given the opportunity, right? And this notion that you talk about, it's really a brilliant way of what I hear you care about is to me. But on the pros, we've talked about that. It shows you're listening. It shows you care. It shows you're going the extra mile to connect and really understand and try to cut through misunderstandings. Then it also will show in my response then when I come to what I've heard, and then start talking about what they've talked about, then it also will give like a reciprocity of where I'm coming from in relation to where they're coming from, and it kind of gives a consensus of okay, I'm repeating this back to them, and then they can agree or disagree or slightly tweak what I've said about them, and so then there's kind of a consensus building. We're on the same page about what we're both talking about, right? And we kind of have some kind of mutual understanding of where we're both at, and then we can go from there. So that's the pros of this. The cons of that approach, to me, it seems a little bit sometimes forced, contrived, overly formal. But so there's times when it's, I think, more natural to do and more helpful when we're having kind of more formal conversations like this and more public conversations. And but as far as my casual relationships, I don't normally do that. I could probably benefit a lot from doing that more, actually, because it also shows respect. It's just a really show of respect of doing that. It takes a little bit of training for me because it does seem more contrived and forced. But it's just a matter of habit, right? I'm not in the habit of doing that when I talk. But if I would do that more, then it would feel more natural and authentic. So I think this is a great reminder for me, Wendy, of this technique and method. I just immediately see the benefits from it automatically. Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I mean, it can be a bit contrived in the beginning, and it feels a bit awkward, and
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to do it because they kind of go, oh, it feels awkward and contrived.
Mm-hmm.
But it's worth persevering through that edge, because your relationships will instantly improve. And the other thing is, so I'm I I've been doing that practice to, what I hear you care about is, you know, what I hear you care about is finding a way to have a natural conversation and to elicit feedback. And I'm going to come back to feedback in a second.
Okay.
but point my finger. I'm going to come back with that.
That's authority.
but but I want to make sure I remember. That's the thing.
Exactly. Yes.
But because I'm training my mind all the time, I'm sort of really conscious of it. I'm sort of so habituated to it now. At Christmas time, I was talking with a relative, and sometimes it can be a little bit jagged, our conversations. And I just went, so what am I hearing? Let me see if I've got this. So it sounds like what you're describing is this, and this. And because I kind of have been training on what he cares about, it sort of almost seeps into the background now. And then I can kind of go, what is it I'm actually aware, like, what is kind of coming here? And he said, that's exactly right. And so there's something about the awareness of that comes with mindfulness and comes with mindful listening that does help just the other person feel understood, because that's the point of a conversation. Does this other person feel understood?
It's very, yeah. Keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
And I want to go on to feedback. So
Sure.
they've done buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of research. Who gives feedback, good feedback? How do you get good feedback? All that sort of stuff. And who gives good feedback? And the answer is, how good are you at receiving feedback? And if you're
Mm.
good at receiving feedback, you are really good at giving feedback.
Ah.
But if you don't really engage with receiving feedback, like I just do all the time,
Hmm.
then you actually are kind of bad at giving feedback.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah.
So it was very interesting. I was speaking with a volunteer recently. He's been doing our logos. And I said to him, thank you so much for doing this. Without you doing the logos for my community group, I wouldn't be able to go feel so confident about the meetings that I've got. So I've got some really big meetings coming up. I'm meeting one of the senior directors in our state bus company. That's tomorrow.
Wow.
So without having good logos, I can't get good business card. I can't get a
Oh,
good,
yeah.
marketing, all my marketing
Yeah,
material.
it's big
People
in
often,
marketing. Yeah. This
it's
visual.
it's really important to come across as a professional organization, even though it's a
Sure.
department of one.
Sure.
But but and so I was able to tell him, so what is really important about what you do is that it allows me to present the organization as a professional organization. What you do is giving me that capacity to be able to um, present to people who are really senior, who's very important in an organization. And I can do that with confidence because of these logos. And I'm not going to go into the whole marketing logos, all that sort of stuff. What I wanted to really highlight is by telling him, this is how you fit into your work, fits into the larger picture of what I do and the organization, and therefore the organization does. He was like, oh, that was so nice that you told me that. So I think giving feedback, receiving feedback, it's sort of the same thing is what I want to say.
It's a great insight, and it goes back into seeing what someone cares about, and what you said. It shows that you value and validate what they do, and that's very important as well. And what you and going back to what you said, what identifying what someone cares about, then it also cuts through a lot of things that obscure, a lot of emotions that may get in the way, or a lot of things that aren't important to the core of what's going on. And then you can kind of tell, also with the care, you can tell the purpose of why someone's saying what they're saying too, and maybe what their goals are and what they want out of it, their intentions. So it's great. And the feedback thing really rang true with me, because yeah, the better we can receive feedback, the I think the more effective we'll be in giving it. It seems pretty clear and obvious. So I want to just wrap up the team. So it seems like this ideal notion of teams that I have, neither of us have any experience in this, and I think it's kind of a rarity in the world where when we meet like-minded individuals and we all want to do something that we want to do together towards a common goal, other than like sports or situations we're kind of forced into and assigned by others to be in these kind of contrived things that someone else has kind of put us in for us, and something that we don't go out of our way to mutually seek, like-hearted, like-minded individuals to come together on our own accord and on behalf. So I think we'll have to set that aside. And well, yeah, you got another comment, and we've got like 3 minutes to talk about community, which is the big
Ah,
juicy topic, right? So
okay. I'll be real quick
sure.
because actually I've got a client and he
Mm.
started a business with, in fact, I've had a couple of clients, they started businesses, startups with a friend. And both of those relationships have broken as a result of the
Yeah,
startup.
yeah,
So, and both of them are lovely people, but actually their co-worker was very difficult. So I know one of them is very difficult, and I know from the other conversations that if they had people that who were equally able to self-inquire, that would make a huge difference. So that I think is a really important part. So going on to community,
yeah, that's
and
important.
I
So
don't know how you deal with that one. I mean,
yeah.
I will say something about teams because
Hmm.
actually I have a community group, and so I have volunteers and they come into my life, and actually they're really positive relationships. I only had one interaction which was really like, whoa, where was that coming from? And that felt very, very pediatric, very, very pediatric. So, and community is like that larger version of that. So when you were saying community, what were you referring to? The monastery?
Well, that's the thing. I don't want to specifically out anything like that, but we've talked about community on so many different levels before. So I don't know what else we can say about it. This is basically kind of the larger aspect of life that we're in. We're in a community whether we want to be or not. Where we live is the community we're in too. I would just, so the people around us in the greater, and then we can choose to be in other types of communities. So a larger aspect, and I would just say in general, some people need to be in community, and they have yet to have a lot of mastery around that. And but then there's other people who are kind of stifled and limited in certain communities, and they need to break more into partnerships and teams, I think. So yeah, and some people lose um, qualities in communities, and some people gain beneficial qualities. So I think it all depends on where you've at, what you've done, what your temperament is, what your challenges are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And it's a really huge complex dynamic that we can't really talk about in a couple of minutes, and it really needs kind of a more focus of what we're talking about. We talk about intentional communities. That's a popular buzzword right now, so yeah. And communities focused around a theme, but there's just so many different multidimensional relational aspects when being a community, and there's so many factors to consider. And Melissa Reed says hi, by the way. So hi, Melissa. Thanks for
Oh, I
being here.
haven't even seen any comments, by the
Yeah,
way.
I wasn't looking. I
Oh,
checked
I
it early
just,
on.
hello,
Sure.
hello. Sorry about that. We missed you there. Gosh, I was on the wrong chat. Anyway, gosh. So sorry about Ms. Reed. We missed you.
Yes,
We
yes.
definitely forgot.
Yes.
My
Sorry about
bad,
that.
my bad.
Same.
So the other thing I will say about
Hmm.
community in 1 second is that I do know about a monastic community, and they read the 37 practices of a bodhisattva at the beginning of every sit. They chant that every
How
day.
long does that take?
Or I don't know if it's the 37 practices of
Sure.
bodhisattva, but it's something similar,
Sure.
and it takes a few minutes.
Okay.
And what it does is it's all these reminders about how to be kind to people and how to be aware and they say that it can kind of get a bit fraught, but they by repeating these phrases, it helps them train to be that way. So
We did the four great vows, which I didn't say vow during that, by the way, but that's a whole other topic. But yeah, those are hugely profound things to start off a practice with, too. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. All right. So I think we're at time, and I'm very
You
sorry
are.
about Ms. Reed that we
Yeah.
missed that.
Yes.
That was my bad. I was clicked on the
It's
wrong
okay.
one.
It was just a hello. So better late than never.
I know,
Yes.
but I always
I
like to
know.
have it. I
I
always like to have it
know.
because
I
I
went
know the
full screen
conversation
too,
goes.
and I didn't see it until later, and
Yeah,
then didn't want to
my
interrupt
bad.
the flow
There
for
you
it
go.
till here at the end.
All
But
right.
yeah, well, it's been great. I'm glad I actually learned a lot here, and I've got some things to practice with on my own. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next month, right? That's the plan.
Yeah, that's the plan. We'll see what happens.
Okay, be well.